Greetings, everyone! My name is Eric Fares, and welcome to Wikia's Year of Fandom. Today's subject will be on Thor's sister taking over the role of Thor in the Avengers. Here with me today is a Wikia member. His name is Jamie. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie Hari, founder of the Marvel and DC databases. You know me from the Comic Book Showcase or from the Marvel database, probably.
Thank you for joining me here. This is definitely a really cool thing that Wikia is doing, and we want to start off kind of in segments here. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to start off with a little bit of the past of Thor and his hammer, because this is not the first time that the God of Thunder has lost his hammer to someone else in some way. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of just run down a few of the big name titles of people who have held the hammer for whatever reason, and then at the end I'll just kind of throw out a couple quick ones for you, just so you can, if you want to look them up, you can. So starting off here, we actually have one that I think is really cool. His name is Boar, and he is actually the father of Odin, and his first appearance was in Thor number 600, and what happened was Loki, who at the time was female, don't ask, summoned Thor's grandfather to Manhattan. And during this big fight that happened, Thor throws his hammer at him, to which, his surprise, Boar just kind of grabs it and says, "The heck's this?" and throws it away. So that was a very interesting one, but it actually ended in those two having a big fight, and Thor actually kills Boar, which actually does make him lose the hammer again, just because he's now unworthy and he has to get it back, but I just think that initial reaction of Boar just catching the hammer was hysterical. The next one is actually something I find pretty interesting. During Marvel's little Marvel vs. DC, number 2 actually, Wonder Woman actually had a chance to hold the hammer herself. Now, in a battle with Shazam, or Captain Marvel, depending on how you know him, Thor had lost his grip on his hammer in basically his usual way of pretty much getting beat the crap out of him. He's lost the hammer. Wonder Woman came across it, and when she picked it up, she was given the power of Thor, which was pretty interesting because the hammer deemed her worthy. But all of a sudden, Storm just immediately shows up and basically challenges her to a fight. Now, Diana, in all her wisdom, decides that this would be a very unfair fight because I could win easily with this hammer. And she drops the hammer, and then immediately gets electrocuted and knocked the heck out. The next person I would like to talk about is actually Captain America himself. In The Mighty Thor, number 390, and in Fear Itself, number 7, Captain America had actually held the hammer in those both occasions. In the first occasion, during a battle with Grog, Thor had become subdued and couldn't get to his hammer. But thankfully, Rogers came up and found the hammer, and with just enough worthiness to hold it, he was able to pick it up and throw it back to Thor. So it was kind of a quick occasion. He didn't really use it, but the hammer knew that Rogers would give the hammer back, so he allowed him to at least do that to throw it to him. However, in Fear Itself, he actually got to wield the hammer for longer because Thor was completely rendered out, and the hammer deemed him worthy enough to charge into a final battle using the hammer, which I just think is a great iconic image of Roger just holding the hammer up with his shield and just lightning hitting. I just think it's a great image. The next one, and this one is actually really cool to me, is Superman. In JLA Avengers number 4, there was a fight with Krona, and it was the very final fight between this great big villain. And Superman had already had Captain America's shield. Well, he had also gained the hammer itself because Thor was rendered out. Seems to be a theme here. And he was able to use it to do one big attack against Krona's machine to cripple it. It was the only thing he was able to do because immediately he got knocked back and the hammer was lost. And later on, when he tried to lift it again, after Krona was defeated, he couldn't, which then Thor came up to him and explained to him that what Odin had done was he had lifted the enchantment so that someone could use the hammer in this big fight against Krona. And so basically Odin knew that someone had to use it. And so I just think it's very appropriate having Superman holding the hammer of Thor for this, again, an iconic image. The final one that I'm going to actually talk about here is probably the most iconic person who's ever held the hammer, and that would be Beta Ray Bill. In the Mighty Thor number 337, Bill was basically the protector of his race, the Corbinites. And during this big misunderstanding that happened between Thor and Bill, Bill and Thor kind of thought themselves enemies, even though they were technically on the same side. During the fight, Beta Ray Bill actually beat Thor, and by that right, the hammer deemed him worthy to hold it himself. And he went on to hold it for a little while. And it was actually pretty interesting because this was back when Thor was actually Donald Blake with his little cane that he would slam down. Later on, though, once he realized that there was a misunderstanding, he gave the hammer back willingly to Thor. Odin just thought this was so great, and he thought him so worthy that he made him his own hammer called Stormbreaker. And to this day, not only does he still have the hammer, but Thor and Beta Ray Bill have been the closest of friends for the longest time, and I just love that battle mentality that has carried over into a friendship. Okay, now I just want to go over a quick little honorable mentions. I'm not going to explain them, but these are things you can go look up. These people who have also held the hammer for one reason or another are Storm, which was a fake hammer given to her by Loki. Magneto, that one is very fun, look it up. Jane Foster in a What If story. Conan the Barbarian, that just seems awesome on all accounts. Rogue, another What If story. Throg, which was Thor turned into a frog. Hulk, sort of, on 2 occasions. Earth X Thor, which I love because Loki tricked Odin into turning Thor into a woman. It was great. Black Widow, another What If. And Eric Masterson, which is a merged Thor merged with Eric to keep him alive, and so they became, I think, Thunderstrike is the name. And probably one of my favorite, probably right now, is Deadpool, who got a fake hammer from Loki, and I just the iconic image of Deadpool wearing the armor and the hammer, just glorious. And now we're going to move into the next segment, which we're going to talk basically about present time, and I'm going to allow Jamie to pretty much take his little reign here and give us the information we need.
Obviously, this storyline of building up how Thor is no longer worthy, which we'll get to in a second, and how a mysterious character, who we'll get to in a second, has come to now wield the hammer. It has been going on and building up for actually about a year, and give or take. So some of the earlier events, obviously leading up to how Thor himself lost the ability or lost his worthiness, began in Original Sin, which I believe was a Brian Michael Bendis story, 6 or 7 issues long. Anyway, long story short, he got in a fight where with Nick Fury and some of the life model decoys and whatnot, and in order to beat him, Nick Fury whispered something to Thor that made Thor no longer worthy. So that probably made Thor realize something, or come to the conclusion of something that made him not worthy. So that was just a little bit of background on how he was not worthy. A number of events occurred after the situation with Thor losing his worthiness. One of which is Thor and Loki travel to a land called Heaven, which is actually a 10th realm of Asgard. You're familiar with the first 9. This land called Heaven is inhabited by angels, one of which is Angela, the character brought over by Neil Gaiman to Marvel. Without going into too much detail about her and the situation, how she turns out to be a long-lost sister of Thor, and Odin comes in, and there's a big fight, and Thor gets his butt kicked again. At one point, we see a conversation between the Allmother of Asgard and Odin, talking about the situation with Thor, and Odin tells her to remember her place, and that, effectively alluding to the fact that women shouldn't really be involved in this situation. And it's actually just not long after we actually see a woman picking up the hammer and saying, "There must always be a Thor." Now, we don't know too much about this mysterious female Thor at this point, but as you can imagine, this is going to have a ripple effect throughout not only Asgard, but the entire Marvel Universe. and how it plays in with the story of Angela, who's just recently again joined Marvel. It all remains to be seen. Right now, we've got 3 issues of the new Thor out, and issue 4 comes, I believe, January 15th. There's lots of storytelling to be told here, and I don't think this is going to be a short story arc. It's exciting to see where we've come in just this short amount of time, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the story of the female Thor playing out. So back to you, Eric. What are you thinking? Like, so we've got a female Thor. Everyone at first was kind of wondering when the news kind of broke that there would be a female Thor. That is Thor going to be turned into a woman again, like he was before, like you were mentioning, or is this actually going to be a separate character? Now we know all about who it is, and what do you think about that? Now that we have a different person, holding the mantle of Thor.
Oh man, and the funny thing is, this is definitely very new to me. Hearing all this information, because I've been unable to keep up with modern comics these days, and so when I first heard about the whole Thor, the female Thor thing, because there was so little information about it, I honestly thought they were just going to do what they did before. When Loki tricked Odin into turning Thor into a woman as a kind of a joking punishment, basically, to kind of teach him a little more morality and modesty, and just all these lessons he wanted to teach him. But it was just a trick.
I definitely think that there's going to be a future here. Thor himself, although like you said, he's not quite dead, he's a little bit mangled. He lost an arm in a battle with Malekith and some frost giants when he was wielding Yarnborn instead of Mjolnir, because he obviously wasn't worthy. But since then, he's actually met up with a alternate version of Thor who has a Mjolnir version that is wielded only by the unworthy. So he's actually got a Mjolnir back again. So that's kind of funky, but yeah, a lot of interesting stuff going on.
But I guess just kind of closing thoughts here, just to kind of say it, is that I guess on my point is, my final thoughts is I'm very excited to see where this is going. I'm very excited to actually take the time to go and read some of these older stories that I hadn't gotten to read yet, especially like what you described, and kind of get myself caught up. And I'm definitely excited for this new character, Angela, and see where she's being taken. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, that's it. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, and it will be interesting to see what writers they put on it and how it evolves over the course of the next 12 to 24 months. The new relationship, especially between Thor, Loki, and Angela.
All right. Well, you all have heard it, so those are our opinions. I would love to hear what you guys think, you the viewers. I mean, your opinions are just as important, especially in the world of comics. So any ideas you have, please leave them in the comments section. Just keep this conversation going. And this is the one thing that's wonderful about comics, is it keeps you curious, it keeps you entertained, but it also keeps you thinking, and it just allows you to really interact with these characters a lot more. So thank you for joining both of us on this year of fandom from Wikia, and thank you, Jamie, for joining me and helping making this a lot easier.
Thanks, Eric.